And welcome once again to another episode of the Horizon Roundtable. I am Bob McDonald, and you can find me on Twitter at Bob McDonald. And joining me, of course, is my co-host Jimmy Lemke.
Good morning, or whatever time of day you personally are listening to this.
Yep. And Jimmy can be found on Twitter at PantherU. And
Yes, I can.
You can follow us on Twitter at the podcast on Twitter at HorizonRT. You really should do that because we're doing not just the podcast. We're talking about the podcast and everything, but we have content now. Our writers are yeah, and they're killing it. So you guys don't want to miss. You guys definitely don't want to miss that stuff.
Right.
So absolutely. Yes, we're recording this on obviously we record on Sundays, and naturally, I'm sure Jimmy has his activities. I myself, for reasons that escape me, I usually watch How It's Made on the Science Channel, but today I was drifted towards an episode in a rerun of Alaskan Bush People. I don't know why I don't know why I keep watching them because let's be honest, they're frauds. First of all, they're not even in Alaska anymore. They're in freaking Washington State. And the last season before that, they were in Colorado. Also, I should point out that this is not a personal opinion. This is according to the state of Alaska that they're frauds too. So
is John LeCrone trying to add them to the Horizon League yet, or no?
I doubt that. There might be, since it's clear that John LeCrone has kind of is trying to consolidate all of the Midwest schools. Them being in Washington might be a little far out of his reach. I don't know. So I don't think so. They have enough. There's enough of them there's enough Alaskan Bush people that they could field a team. I don't know about their eligibility, but it's whatever. Since they
it is what it is.
So
we got some good stuff on the show today.
We do
some
indeed.
Good stuff to talk about.
We absolutely do. The one thing that we did want to talk about today is that Stadium.com actually put out the attendance figures for 2019 for all the Horizon League schools. James Squire, obviously at STLVU fan, pointed this out. So shout out to him for bringing this to our attention.
Love you, Jim.
Yes, we've had him on the show before when he was his beloved Valparaiso Crusaders were still a part of our conference.
I don't have to have we don't have to have Valpo in the conference first to have Jim Squire on.
We absolutely don't. So Jim, just whenever if you feel the hankering for jumping on a podcast, the invitation is always open.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking at I'm kind of looking at. So basically, what Stadium has done is they've compiled the average attendance figures for both 2018 and 2019, as well as the sales figures for 17-18. I guess it should come as no surprise that the top three schools in each year. The top three schools, Wright State, Northern Kentucky, Oakland. It should come as no surprise. Those are the three teams that have the highest attendance in the Horizon League. Wright State has consistently had the highest attendance in the Horizon League. It seems like almost every year, really.
Well, I think that there's a few things that we need to take into account. Obviously,
of course.
Obviously, we can point to the fact that Wright State is a strong conference member for men's basketball. They have had, it's been a long time, about 15 years since they've been even an, I would say, average Horizon League member.
That's true.
But
I will point out that
consistency is part of it.
I will point out that even back in the day when they were kind of a mediocre team, their attendance figures were always kind of the highest in the league. And I don't know, I'm not sure what we can attribute to that. Maybe
I'll tell you everything right now. It's market.
Yeah.
Wright State exists in a market where there's only one other major sports team, and it's the other university.
That's correct.
Come here.
That is correct. I see your dog is co-hosting as well today. Okay.
Yeah, she's walking, and I think I don't know. She's about to get taken out.
So hopefully my dogs are not going to do whatever they do usually, specifically
Oh,
Harry.
good. Yeah, she's not much of a barker, especially right now. Right now, she's just walking, jiggling her chain, and annoying me. But right state exists with Dayton in one market. There's I think there's like a minor league hockey team, or there's minor league baseball. I know that, and it's Dayton, and it's an hour or 2 hours away from any other major cities. So of course they're going to be getting a lot of the attendance.
Sure. And a lot of and what's also interesting is a lot of that fan base is like an older fan base. I mean, we've been we both have been following the goings of the Horizon League for an extended period of time, and
right.
A lot of the guys who follow and still continue to follow Wright State, like for example, Terry Bogan Road Trip, man, he's like an institution, and he has been for like 30 some odd years even. So that it's that longevity of those fans that you don't necessarily see anywhere else within the Horizon League necessarily. I mean, you do, but not as concentrated as within Wright State.
Well, I mean, Wright State, you got to remember their basketball program has had, since they jumped up from 87, 88, I think it was the late 80s when they jumped up to Division One.
Yeah,
they had a lot of success in Division Two. So they've got history.
They do
behind them. Vitaly Potapenko.
Yes. Cleveland Cavaliers lottery pick Vitaly Potapenko, or Potapenko, or however the hell you pronounce it. It's been, right? Yeah, I guess. I mean, for years, Joe Tate from they
won a national title in Division Two back in the mid '80s.
They did.
They've been consistently one of the top four programs in the conference, top four teams in the conference. They rarely do they make rarely do they finish in the bottom half of the Horizon League.
And I really think that's important too, because they've never had that like drop off year, and if it has, they've usually bounced. They've always been kind of even before they started this. Even before kind of the Brad Brownell years, starting with the Brad Brownell years, even then it was, they weren't terrible, but they weren't, they were good enough to kind of keep the attention there, which is, and again, market does help here as well. So, but it makes perfect sense to me, at least, how that would be the case.
Since 2006, since Brad Brownell's first year in 06-07.
Yes.
Wright State has had 2 seasons where they've been in the bottom half of the conference.
2 seasons.
Billy Donlin's second season where they finished 7-11, and his second to last season where they finished 3-13. Both seasons they were 8th in the conference.
But
one of them was Butler's last year, so we still had 10. And then 14-15, I think we had 10 as well. Did we? I think because we added Oakland.
Because we added Oakland.
Was that before or after Loyola dropped out?
No,
I think that was
after, because it might have been.
Yeah, but Loyola was like 13, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, they've always bounced back. I mean, Billy Donlin followed to both 8th place finishes with a 3rd place tie and a 2nd place tie.
Yeah.
So they've always been a strong program.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they're there. I will say though, I can't remember. I don't have their yearly attendance figures in front of me, but I will say that I always thought that they averaged 5 or more, or like in that 5 to 6 range.
I know they did like in the early 2000s. I always thought they did.
I will tell you what I see here,
and I want to say that that's the case, but
I'm just saying I see of the 10 schools.
Mm-hmm.
I see 2 of them that show better numbers from 2018 to 19.
Okay.
One of them being UIC averages 7 more people, so
7 whole more people.
Call it a wash.
Yeah.
And then Detroit Mercy averaged about 600 more, which is nice and represents a 50% rise in attendance, except for the fact that they started at 1240, so they're not even at 1200 or 2000.
And you know what? Honestly, I think it's, and I'll be in all honesty, that number is probably going to jump up this year too. Benefits of having Antoine Davis.
Yeah, I mean, you got a kid that's got legitimate NBA aspirations. Yeah. That's going to be a pretty big deal. I'm a little concerned about Northern Kentucky dropping from 4,100 to 3,600, and that's obviously this last season attendance. So it's before John Brand leaves. So are they going to drop off even more? I really hope that's not the case. Unlike Wright State, they've got a couple. They've got Cincinnati. They got Xavier to contend with.
Yeah.
They've got the Reds. They've got the Bengals. There's not all of those are the same season, obviously.
Yeah, well,
but people.
I don't know about the Bengals.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is that people will spend. They will budget money and time for sports. Sports followings.
Sure.
And people in Cincinnati have a bunch of other possibilities.
At the same, well, you also have to remember too that and I think, and I actually allude to kind of what Kyle Craven and Chris Hart said on their podcast, The North Report, which they had their debut episode. And by the way, if you have a chance, go listen to that as well. That where they're situated, not only do they have kind of the Cincinnati influences in terms of fan bases, they also have the Kentucky as well, because obviously they're in Kentucky, so obviously they're the people in that area may also still have a great interest in either Louisville or Kentucky, or actually the University of Kentucky too. I mean, because those are two institutions.
Well, those are far.
Sure.
Kentucky and Louisville are both pretty far away from NKU. NKU's barely into.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like saying
I'll be very interested.
Badger basketball will affect Green Bay attendance. If it does, I doubt it's much of an effect.
I will be very interested in seeing kind of this next year with them in terms of attendance. Yes. I mean, let's be because they've Northern Kentucky for the last since they've gotten to the Horizon League, specifically since they've jumped. They kind of made the jump from kind of that first year where they were kind of near the bottom to that big jump where they were competing for where they've been competing for Horizon League championship. I'll be very interested in seeing how the new change in coaches affects that. I'll be very interested in seeing kind of how that whole thing plays out. Not to mention the loss of Drew McDonald, because obviously that'll be a huge thing too. So, I guess it should come as no surprise that the bottom three here are Milwaukee, IUPUI, and Cleveland State. It should come.
Yeah, Milwaukee lost a whole 3 people from 2018 to 2019 in attendance.
Yeah.
Announced attendance of 15-17, 15-14. So we're just steaming along. We're rolling. Amanda Braun's really got this program going in the right direction.
I can tell. I can truly tell.
We win. We win. We win. We're successful. We're always in the top 100 of the RPI and the top 3 of the conference, and that's why we're always, winning.
I'm sorry. That must be like those must be figures from a parallel universe.
Those two figures are reasons that Amanda Braun gave for moving on from Rob Jeter and spending $600,000, $700,000 of university money a year ahead of schedule so that they could hire new people and just pay them to not work there.
Yeah, always fun.
Yeah, so it was just I'm just pointing out that we ain't back there yet, and it's 4 seasons out of we're 4 seasons or 3 seasons?
I think that
16, 17. So we've had 3 seasons of
3 seasons.
transition basically because we lost coach. And I don't blame him for losing Lavelle Jordan. That was just a perfect storm.
Of course,
you can't really
obviously
do it. But looking at these schools with coaching changes, obviously, Milwaukee, we've gone from being one of the better programs in the conference to being one of the worst programs in the conference, and that reflects in the attendance.
Yeah.
We have an axe wound for an athletic director. That's that reflects in attendance.
Sure. No, that makes. I mean,
we're in. I'll say this too. Milwaukee and IUPUI were the biggest schools in the conference.
Yeah.
So you would like to see higher attendance, but we're also mostly commuter schools.
That's true.
Milwaukee had. From about 2000 to 2010, Milwaukee had started to move about 15,000 of its 30,000 students eventually lived on campus. Mm-hmm. So we have as many residential students living on campus or in the neighborhood, and I consider the whole east side Milwaukee's campus.
Sure.
We have 15,000 students. That's as many as a few schools have in undergraduates total.
That's actually more than Cleveland State has in undergraduates. Seriously.
Right. So, it's not a problem. Cleveland State's perfectly fine. It's just that we're not entirely a commuter school. We do play our games downtown away from the east side. So it's not exactly the easiest thing. And kids don't like hopping on buses or whatever. Maybe if the hop streetcar gets pulled up to UWM, maybe we'll start seeing that more. But honestly, I think that, you look at the bottom three schools and what do we have in common? We're all commuter schools.
Yes.
Youngstown State is something of a commuter school, but there's nothing to do in Youngstown.
No.
Oakland is something of a commuter school, but you're a little away from downtown. You're kind of the suburb. It's a suburban school, not so much of an urban school. Mm-hmm. Northern Kentucky has done a great job of the transition, and they're coming off success. And there, Wright State doesn't have a lot to contend with.
Yeah.
Green Bay only has the Packers, which, I mean, they also have the Green Bay Gamblers, minor league team, and maybe they're even their own women's basketball team to contend with. But the fact of the matter is that Green Bay doesn't have a whole lot to contend with as far as other things to do. So there's 2,500 to 2,100. They're put themselves in square in the middle of the pack. UIC has been around 2,000 because, like the other four schools at the bottom, the four schools below them, they're commuter schools. Maybe not Detroit Mercy. Detroit Mercy is just its own animal because it's private and it's smaller.
Yeah.
But UIC is also, it just comes from the biggest city out of all of us, so naturally it's going to be a larger group. So I think that a lot of this attendance number, the way it shakes 1 to 10, there's recent and sustained success. Wright State, Northern Kentucky, Oakland.
Yeah.
There are schools that don't have to contend with people, and maybe Devin had. I mean, Green Bay's had some recent success, good success, as well as they don't have a lot to contend with. But it's a smaller area than most of the league. Youngstown State has nothing to contend with. It's a smaller area. So
the thing about Youngstown, the thing about Youngstown State, though, this is a. If I remember because this 17-18 number, that 2994 and the 2465,
we just call it 2018 and 2019.
18 and 19 numbers. Those are the
drops 500.
Yeah, but those are the first 2 years. Those are the first 2 years of the Jared Calhoun era, and I remember specifically though that their attendance numbers under Jerry Slocum were never really that great. They were definitely not fourth in the conference.
They were never 3,000 a game.
No,
if I remember.
The only time
them being
exactly. So
they always had the occasional game where they'd sell out the Beagley, like when Butler was really great.
Yeah.
They would sell out Butler,
which literally every other Horizon League school had at that point in time too. But yeah, but I think kind of the you kind of see the dynamic, at least with Youngstown State, you see kind of the dynamic from Jerry Slocum, who kind of was there and kind of going through the motions, and the Jared Calhoun, who was a little bit more has been more proactive in terms of kind of the outreach. and you see that, you kind of see that, and that also kind of plays into this, and I'm sure this plays into the, again, kind of going back to this whole concept of, the coaching, who the coach is and how that dynamic has affected things as well. With Milwaukee, it's just kind of a, I got rid of Rob Jeter, Laval Jordan, and now I'm on 2 years of Pat Baldwin. Who
I think Pat Baldwin was hired largely because she had familiarity with him.
Sure.
Because they both worked at Green Bay, so she knew him. Mm-hmm. I think that Amanda Braun hired Pat Baldwin. I think I don't know if she had the foresight of saying, oh, maybe if we get him, maybe we can get his son as a recruit down the line. I really hope that she didn't make a hiring decision based on that. But
you never know.
I'm trying to find reasons that you hire him over Dana Ford, who was the other finalist, who ended up getting the Missouri State job. And look at Missouri State. Yeah, they're getting 4-star recruits now.
They are.
Like, and legit 4-star recruits. Not like we found college recruiting D1.biz ranked this guy as a 4-star recruit. I mean, like, legit, like, Rivals Scout, ESPN, put somebody as a 4-star recruit. So, yeah, I feel like it was a bit of a mistake. I hope I am wrong. I would like him to do better. I haven't seen it yet.
No.
And, at the end of the day, we are, at the end of the day, we're not there.
And the Cleveland State numbers don't surprise me at all. You're talking about it, not just a coaching issue, but up to the hiring of Scott Garrett, an entire, I want to say nearly decade of a department just atrophied, starting with John Perry and then moving on with Mike Thomas. I mean, if there's no, honestly, if there's no, there was absolutely no incentive to, it just didn't seem like there was a sense of urgency or any kind of incentive to, make things happen. Even in the last good year of that Cleveland State under Gary Waters, where you have a team that's competing for a Horizon League championship, and then of course the bottom falls out, and maybe that's what happened too, because the last 2 years of the Gary Waters era, you saw kind of Waters kind of fall off himself, thinking, maybe it's just not worth it anymore. And then you come in and then because honestly, let's be honest here. If we'd have known then what we know now, Gary Waters' contract was up in 2019. His final contract ended in 2019. Yeah. So, given what we know now, what was the point? Why didn't we just? Do we chalk it up to Mike Thomas's ego or what? Because what we ended up with
a buyout clause.
I don't know what happened.
Did he have a buyout? Did Gary Waters have a buyout clause in his contract? Because if he had a buyout clause, which every single contract for a state employee at a university should have a buyout clause where we will pay you X amount of dollars to go away. Rob Jeter's didn't, so Amanda a year ahead of time put $600,000 into him and his assistants.
Yeah,
I want to know if Gary Waters had a buyout, if it's $100,000, and Mike Thomas thinks I can do better getting somebody else, then I get it.
It could be, but I think also, if I'm not mistaken, as well as as I understand it, Gary Waters was also given was given another position within the university. I think it was a special assistant, which is basically a job in name only, essentially.
It's called it's transfer. It's commonly something that Amanda used to get people out of the job.
Exactly.
In fact, Rob's lead assistant, Chad Boudreau, was reassigned to the dean of students to be an assistant to the dean of students.
Yeah.
When Sandy Botham was let go as the women's basketball coach, they assigned her to the Alumni Association,
Yeah.
which she was actually really good at that job.
Uh-huh.
Kevin O'Connor, the sports info director that Amanda needed to get rid of for some random reason, even though he was excellent at his job, got reassigned to Chapman Hall. And they kept him because they know that he's good at his job.
Sure.
So Amanda's obviously a really good eye for talent.
I can tell.
You know,
almost as good as Mike Thomas. But yeah, but I'm looking. But again, I'm kind of I'm looking at it from the standpoint of knowing what we know now. Gary Waters literally could have finished out his contract and retired in the 2 years that Dennis Felton was here. He probably would have gotten better results than. I mean, I don't, you know, but
I don't know. I don't know if we could have predicted that Dennis Felton was going to flame out so quickly, or not, maybe not so quickly, but I don't know if we could have predicted that he would have flamed out so
spectacularly.
Spectacularly.
Yeah.
I always thought that if Dennis Felton was going to be a failure, the team would just lose a little bit and be done. I didn't know that it would get really contentious in the program.
No. Well, and
so
but also too, and again. Going back to these attendance figures. I mean, this started the kind of the downward slide started. You know, that's 2016 year, the last 2 years of Gary Waters, where I think, you know, and again, maybe it's because Gary kind of saw the end of the road coming and he was like, all right, this is kind of it for me. I'm going to get out of Dodge, go in peace, I suppose. And then, but you know, and I understand that whole thing. I get that whole thing because, you know, again, like I said, you know, a long train of atrophy within athletics. That isn't. I mean, within athletics, not necessarily any of the coaches' faults. You know, they're just sitting over there trying to do their jobs. But you know, internally, I mean, what was the incentive? What was the sense of urgency? There wasn't. You had a guy in John Perry who basically, for reasons that it will continually escape me, gets a 3-year extension for basically making sure that the books are balanced and that's it. And then turning around and, you know, and then you know, following that up with Mike Thomas, who did in fact flame out spectacularly in Illinois. You know, he was a reclamation project to begin with, but what did he do instead of actually reclaiming, you know, attempting to prove that that whole Illinois thing was a terrible experience and he was a capable administrator, instead of kind of proving that instead of proving that whole notion that that Illinois was a fluke wrong, he kind of perpetuated that on a much smaller scale. I mean, how do you do that? And I guarantee you, Cleveland State's president Harlan Sands, he knew what was up, which is why I'm sure that he knew he saw what was going on and basically probably maybe could have definitely could have went about it a much better way. Basically told Mike Thomas the jig is up. You got to get out of here. I don't want to say you got to get out of here, but apparently a conversation between Sands and Thomas happened where Thomas resigned at the end of the year to go do quote unquote consulting work, which left
which is fine. That's a way to get out of the job.
Understandable, but what happened afterwards still, I mean, the 2019 numbers kind of bear out where you were dead last in the Horizon League in attendance. There was literally, you had for the entire month of January, there was absolutely nobody minding the store. Nobody.
Yeah.
So, and in that point in time, so much stupid crap happened. You have Dennis Felton's team start off the conference 0-8. I mean, I don't think that happens if somebody's minding the store. You have, you had the issues with the swim team apparently, where you had where the swim coach ends up resigning, because of the things that happened when nobody was minding the store. You had two administrators, two associate ADs, who, because nobody was minding the store in January, they resigned. Again, stemming from the whole thing with the swim team.
Right.
So I understand, pushing an administrator out to get your guy in there, but the circumstances of pushing your guy out and leaving an entire power vacuum in a month, and the numbers bear out. So, I guess it's better late than never that they got, from what I can tell, a very capable administrator in there in Scott Garrett.
Honestly, I'm looking at Cleveland State.
Yeah.
I think that Harlan Sands is somebody that I trust to run the university, and far as being the executive for this basketball program specifically.
Yes.
Because he got rid of Mike Thomas. I mean, he made the tough decision to cut ties with somebody. It's not working. But Scott Garrett looks like he knows what he's talking about, and I feel like they made a great coaching hire, even though it wasn't the guy that wasn't Jermaine Kimbrough that a lot of us wanted to see.
Sure.
It ended up being a good hire, or at least on the surface, it looks like a good hire. Mm-hmm. And obviously, the players on the team, a good chunk of them, they seem to think so too, because some of these guys have decided to turn around and stick with it and stay with the program.
Yes.
So I look at Cleveland State as being healthy starting now. That this is a fresh beginning, and I think that there's reason to be, how would I say this? I think there's reason to be excited for the future of Cleveland State basketball.
I am optimistic for the future, but at the same time, it's still in the back of my head. There are some decisions that I just can't wrap my head around. That entire month of January, I can't wrap my head around that. Or maybe, or honestly, maybe Harlan Sands thought in that month, because one of the associate ADs who ended up resigning was quote unquote the acting athletic director, which is probably why she ended up having to resign why she had to resign. And maybe he thought theoretically that maybe she was capable enough to mind the store, and it clearly didn't happen. So when Mike Alden came in to be that senior advisor to Harlan Sands, and he looks over everything, he's saying something isn't right. You guys got to go. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe that is the situation. It's never really been. It's really never been explained in a manner that makes any level of sense to anybody. But again,
maybe it never will be,
but again, so much time. But at the same time, so much time has passed, and so much other crap has happened that it's almost not even a priority to even think about what's going on, because you have so many other things in place, where you see it's funny because within this athletic program doesn't look at from inside out, does not even bear any level of resemblance to the one that was in place 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely surprising, which is shocking to me. And the one other thing too that I want to point out as well, because I think this is absolutely going to affect
plus, we need to get moving.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, plus we need to get moving. But one of the things that kind of does strike me as interesting with the Cleveland State situation, which I think, again, long term, maybe not this year, but in the future, that will probably will probably help, that will kind of lend some sense of urgency, is that Scott Garrett actually has hired someone who is the associate athletic director for external affairs. Cleveland State hasn't had an external affairs guy since Chris Sedlock left in 2011. So
for people who are not familiar, yes, external affairs will be somebody who oversees development, yep, marketing. Mm-hmm. Usually that person also oversees the ticket sales department,
which this guy does. Yes.
Corporate sponsorship. Mm-hmm. This is somebody who is pivotal, and almost always is the number 2 person in the school or in the
and Cleveland State didn't have one for 8 years.
Yeah, we
which
went
is
from
insane.
Let's see.
So
Chuck Lang left Milwaukee in 2007, I want to say, and we didn't have an external ops guy until we didn't have one for like 4 years.
Yeah,
and it was terrible because once Bud Hady retired, his successors did not. From George Kuntz to Costello, like they didn't have, like George Kuntz didn't have any administrative. He didn't have any like book balancing because Bud could balance the books, whereas George Kuntz couldn't. So we were rudderless, and we were rudderless for like 2 years in that regard after Bud retired.
Sure.
So that was rough. So I can't imagine what it would be like for 8 years without having an external ops guy at Cleveland State.
Again, it's again, it goes back to the sense of urgency and the incentivize. There was no incentive because you didn't have somebody above you who was kind of looking at you sideways if you did something ridiculous. And that happened for 8 years. Now they got a guy in now. Tyler Jones is his name. This guy is. Scott Garrett got this guy from the Ohio State University. I got to say the because Ohio State folks will lose their shit if I don't. But
it's Ohio State University. You all can lick my taint. I'm not a Badger fan anymore, but my hatred towards Ohio State will always. It's not going to go away. Your program is the worst of everything.
Jesus.
And screw your old president with his dumbass bow tie.
And yes.
Anyways,
yeah, I'm sure none of this has anything to do with the fact that you were graced with Andy Geiger's presence at all.
Yeah, fuck that guy too. God, you guys suck, fucking Buckeyes. Anyways, but to move on to wrap up the Cleveland State thing.
Yeah, but yeah, they got that guy. He was the director of ticket sales and fan development, or I can't remember his full title at Ohio State. But they brought that guy in. And obviously knowing kind of what Scott Garrett brings to the table, because his focus was on getting butts in the seats, getting revenue. I mean, he is revenue focused. He's not about keeping the books balanced. He's about generating revenue within this athletic program. And so I think, like I said, I think long term, it looks like a much rosier picture than the last, I want to say even the last 4 years. So
sure, but just move on because we got to move on.
Sure.
Just to wrap up, I will say that I think part of your maybe trepidation or perhaps your hesitation in going full on gung ho Cleveland State is because you have been burned so many times. So I would just try and stay optimistic because you have reason to be optimistic.
I do.
Optimistic.
I mean,
I don't. Unless Pat Baldwin Jr. were to commit to Milwaukee, I don't have reason to be optimistic.
Yeah.
Other places that have reason to be optimistic.
Sure.
Detroit Mercy. Antoine Davis looks fantastic.
Absolutely.
In the 1 year of Mike Davis, they jumped 50%, 600 people in attendance just for 1 year. So obviously Mike Davis is good. Hopefully that they can keep it rolling, get better as a team. I know that he filled in some holes. Maybe Detroit Mercy can get successful.
I think I mean, again, this kind of goes back to something I've said multiple times. You underestimate Mike Davis at your peril. Period.
He's a good coach. I mean, where he has failed has been to not maintain very, very, very high, lofty expectations.
He's at Detroit Mercy. What expectations can he possibly have?
That's my point. Is that this is a better school. Yeah. A better program than it was when he got it.
Yeah, that's true.
He fell out at UAB because of expectations. He fell out at Indiana because of expectations. He left Texas Southern because he wanted to, bring his son somewhere that he can play, that the kid will have a better shot at getting in the NBA.
Yeah.
Which one thing about the Horizon League that is still solid today is that there is still a road to the NBA. Unlike many of these mid-major, low-major conferences, there's still the route to the NBA. The scouts will find you here.
So the one,
but I want to keep it in the scope. I wanted to keep it in the scope of the attendance thing.
now here's I get it, I get it. So the one last thing I want to actually talk about is the actual revenue, the actual ticket sales numbers, because they only have them from 2018, and they obviously don't have them for Detroit Mercy. So the two things that struck me as the most surprising is that Green Bay ticket sales for 2018 were actually highest in the league. So
well, what else is going on in Green Bay, Wisconsin
That's true.
January and February?
Well, no, what I'm saying,
especially when the Packers suck.
Well, what's interesting is that they, in terms of attendance, they were kind of in the middle of the pack. They were like fifth in attendance, but they're first in ticket revenues. So their fans, while there may not be as many, they're spending more money to go to a game. So, but to your point, obviously, since they're kind of the only game in town, and also it's kind of helpful that they're in a situation. And this was in 2018 was a down year for Green Bay, and they still topped out in ticket sales dollars too. So I mean that blows my mind regardless.
They don't have competition.
I guess not.
This is my point again.
Yeah.
And Green Bay is also fairly recently was in the NCAA tournament. So
this is true. True.
And they've still been a decent program after that, so they should be fine. And Link Darner, is he going to build up another NCAA tournament team for the Green Bay fans? Hopefully so.
Yeah.
For in the scope of new coaches,
mm-hmm.
since the entire conference except for Oakland has pretty much had turnover.
Yeah.
Scott Nagy has maintained, maybe dropped a little bit with the attendance. The Northern Kentucky and John Brannon's last year, they dropped 600. So I wonder what the future holds, with everybody else, with new coaches and everything. Well, so a little worrisome.
I do have to ask this one last question, and this is the kind of the 2018 numbers, the ticket sales numbers for IUPUI. They made just a tick under $37,000 for 2018. I'm like, okay, and remember, this is the first year they were in the Horizon League. How are they making their money? I mean, honestly,
student seg fees.
It gotta be, man, because
student segregated fees. What are the student seg fees at Cleveland State for athletics? It's still like $800 a year.
I don't know how much it is, but they're the student fees to that the Cleveland State almost entirely relies on student fees for athletics. I think it's like almost, I want to say like 89-90% of their money that they use comes from student fees. And I know that's not
it's not a
sustainable
giant
thing.
Number.
Yeah, it is. It's not sustainable. I think that's probably part and parcel why Scott Garrett is here. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the IUPUI numbers, and I'm blown away by the fact that it's like 36,987 was their 2018 number, and I'm thinking to myself, I mean, good Lord, and this is the team they brought in. So that actually also leads me to believe that for everybody who had any kind of issue with the Farmers Arena being picked in Indianapolis being picked as the venue for the Horizon League tournament, I look at these IUPUI attendance figures and say there is no advantage whatsoever IUPUI would ever have, like ever.
They're done $3 per credit hour.
Wow.
So if you let's see, let me bust out the calculator here. So if you have 15 credit hours, or 45 credit hours, so you're like that's 90. That can't be right.
No, it really isn't.
$90 a year?
No, it is not $90. Who are you talking about?
I'm looking at CSU Ohio's athletic fee.
No,
no, never mind. The athletic fee provides support for the addition of men's lacrosse and additional opportunities for women in athletics. I was just trying to pick something. It doesn't matter.
No, I'm
Point of
pretty
matter,
sure it's
point
like
of matter
I'm
is
pretty sure it's like
Cleveland State APUI.
I want to say it's like 800,
yeah.
850 a year for student fees. I think is the number I remember. It could be less, but yeah, I think it's about that. But
Cleveland
I can't
State
remember.
dropped from year to year. Dennis Feldman first to second year, they dropped. IUPUI gained, but they were going from nowhere with their new coach. Milwaukee stood pat at fucking garbage. Detroit added up in the year.
Yeah.
UIC stayed about the same with Steve McLean.
Yeah.
The ticket rolls are not as long as his tie. Green Bay dropped off a bit. I wouldn't be too concerned about the almost $400 drop off if I'm a Green Bay fan, particularly because you're another year removed from the NCAA tournament. So I get it. Youngstown State's drop off. I would be a little concerned because I think that they got nearly 3,000 a game in a 2017-18 because everybody's excited about Jared Calhoun. So seeing that
now
they're not
the Youngstown State thing
about,
also kind of surprises me because during that point, well, also you got to remember Youngstown State kind of started off the year not great either. Youngstown State didn't start getting hot until February when they went on that 6-game win streak and catapulted themselves out of the bottom of the barrel.
They're also 8-24.
Yeah.
So the year before, so it wasn't like they were coming off of a big, a big deal.
I will be given what Youngstown State has coming back next year. I will be very interested in seeing how they move, what their attendance is moving forward. And I'm also because they got I'm also interested in how they're gonna count that West Virginia game at the Klotsche Center, because that's on their schedule as well. So I'm actually very interested in how they're gonna count that in their overall attendance figures.
Where is that game?
That is at the Klotsche Center. It's a larger arena in Youngstown.
Okay.
So that's.
West Virginia is not far from there, right? It's like a couple hours.
Couple hours, yeah. But from Youngstown to Morgantown, it's probably maybe
3 hours.
Maybe an hour and a half, even. I don't remember. If you drive real fast, if you drive real fast on the Turnpike and I-79, you can get from Youngstown to Morgantown in I want to say probably about an hour and a half, couple hours maybe. But yeah, be very
2 hours,
be very careful
because
because Pennsylvania State Police are the absolute worst.
That's what I hear.
Yes. So with that said,
we got one more thing to talk about before we call it quits, though.
Oh, one more thing. We got one more thing.
Just to go over, John Parker wrote about it.
Oh shit! Yes, you're absolutely right. So
John Parker wrote about it. The Milwaukee is getting the addition to the Klotsche Center.
I did forget about that. Yes, I don't know why I forgot about that. Yes, absolutely. Yes, John Parker wrote a story for us on this on HorizonRoundtable.com. So be sure to read his thoughts on it. But I definitely wanted to get your thoughts on it because we've talked about this very thing years ago, in the first year of the Horizon Roundtable, we were talking about how Scott Walker screwed you guys over, and this apparently is the progress, I guess, for that.
So here's the deal. So back in 2009-10, I'll try to get through this quickly.
Yes.
Back in 2009, 2010, It was 2009. George Kuntz was AD. We put together. The 2009-10 school year, we put together a drive to get the students to approve a separate segregated fee specifically to build a basketball arena. The original idea that George and a few of us had kicked around, inexplicably I was involved in conversations. It's surprising that they let me in on that, but the idea was to build a basketball arena on campus, 6,000 to 8,000. It was done largely without consulting the basketball staff.
Of course.
A little surprising, but par for the course when it comes to George Kuntz. Rob did help out as far as Rob and the staff and the team did help out in trying to get out the vote and get people to improve it, which we did. A year later, George was let go pretty quickly thereafter. The seg fee was collected $25 a semester per student for every student that was collecting was a undergrad. So you were talking about like 24,000 students times $25 a semester, $50 a year. It was a lot of money. In a few years, they had contracted out as a design firm. So there was like it was like $100,000 of that got spent putting together a design for an arena that didn't happen. Well, that wasn't what they paid for. They paid for something of a master plan, but that money ended up getting changed when Amanda was AD early on, changed it from a basketball arena fee to a athletics facilities fee.
Oh, Jesus.
Which, it partially it allowed for them to make it so that they could build the basketball practice facility. and I can't remember if that was. I think it was just a basketball facilities fee, so we could do a practice facility when we.
If I remember our conversation, I think it was the basketball facility.
I'm apologize if I'm getting any of the salient details wrong, but it had switched to a basketball facility fee, so we could do the practice facility, and then later Amanda made an athletics facilities fee, so she could dip into it for like improvements to like the baseball stadium, because unlike the soccer team that would raise all of the money to make the improvements, like putting lights on the field or putting field turf on the field. Unlike doing like the soccer team where they raise all the money themselves, the baseball team just, got the university to switch around the fee so that they could do it. I've never been a huge fan of the way the baseball team just kind of they do this bowling fundraiser every December. And besides that, they lean pretty heavily on the university itself. Rather than other non-revenue sports that go out of their way to raise their own money, specifically the soccer programs historically. But the basketball practice facility, I had written for Panther U, and it became, after we created the Black and Gold Club, the Booster Club, it became the Black and Gold Club's drive for us to use the basketball practice facility as the way to elevate the level of the program. There are moments in a program's history where you are able to make your program markedly better. You do it by we see Northern Kentucky makes the move to Division I. They capitalize on it. They know that it's coming. They build what is now the BB&T Center. Formerly the Bacon Kentucky Center was built before the move to Division I, in anticipation of the move to Division I.
Sure.
You get that move. Butler, after the Final Fours, apart from the conference moves, Butler entirely renovated the side of Hinkle, the side building attached to Hinkle, to be the new athletics offices and everything. They eventually renovated the football space, and Hinkle, the arena space itself, got some upgrades too.
Sure.
As well as they took a space on the side of the Hinkle arena and turned it into basically this like fundraising room that is excellent for them.
Long story short, Milwaukee didn't do any of this stuff.
Well, long story short is you have opportunities.
Yeah.
Wright State has been successful because they built they have the Nutter Center, but they've also, building that Setzer Pavilion, have made things better. Milwaukee had an opportunity here.
Yeah.
And this was my argument, is that Milwaukee being at the time the biggest school in the conference, Milwaukee being a kind of a basketball crazy city.
Yeah.
Being a university that is largely untapped as far as its athletics potential.
Yeah.
If we were to, we have an arena in what was the Cell and is now the Panther Arena that is strong for, if we were in the Atlantic 10 or the Missouri Valley Conference, two better conferences than the Horizon League.
Yeah.
If we were in those conferences, the Panther Arena would have been, and it would be acceptable, if not a little bit above average, pretty good for the arena.
Sure.
In the Horizon League, it's too big, but that's neither here nor there. So the arena is fine.
Yeah.
The practice situation was the worst in Division One and remains the worst in Division One. And I know this because I looked at all 350 schools.
Yeah.
The closest is Fordham, which practices and plays in the Rose Hill gym. That in downtown New York, they really don't have much space. It's shared between all the athletics programs.
By the way, I'd like to point, since you brought up Fordham, I'd like to point out that Fordham is allegedly Dennis Felton's landing spot as an assistant.
That's fine.
Want to throw that in there. But go on. Go ahead.
Good for him. He deserves to have a career. So Milwaukee. So the practice situation was bad.
Yeah.
I also had a pie in the sky thing about taking the alumni house, which is a very expensive old estate up against Lake Michigan. I had an idea to turn that into a 49% athletics, 51% general student dorm that you could use for the men's basketball team. Mm-hmm. Where it's like a castle. It's amazing. It's beautiful. Renovating it for $5 million, $8 million, they could have turned it into it would have been the best residence in college basketball. Sure. That's not what I'm talking about right here.
No,
my idea was you take the practice facility. If you can, the segregated fee was going to raise in its lifetime about $25 million.
Okay.
At the time, the best practice facility that was out there was Kentucky's $33 million practice facility. Mm-hmm. Duke had built for 25 or 30. Indiana was building for 30. Utah hadn't built their $40 million facility at the time yet. So my idea was this. If you are to elevate Milwaukee, if your end goal is to be a major program, either the big fish in a small pond like Butler was in the Horizon League, or a strong Atlantic 10 or NBC program, or maybe somehow, some way, because we didn't, conference realignment was in the middle of it, so we didn't know if there was going to be a non-basketball power conference that might not include Marquette, because we never get into Marquette's conference. But the idea is that you could elevate Milwaukee to being a top 50, maybe top 25 national program every year by going over the top in building the best practice facility that money can buy. Because if we had $25 million in hand, we figured we could, maybe if we could raise 10, 15 million, we could put together the best practice facility in the country, NBA, college, USA basketball, bar none. If we could do that, then that we could elevate Milwaukee to being near that level. And what I would pitch to fans that didn't like Rob Jeter, I called it Jeter-proofing the program. You would make it so that even an average coach could make it to the NCAA tournament. So the idea was you spend 30, 35, the number we used was 35 million. And I actually had Joe Rice, because we have an architecture school. Joe Rice is a fan, an alum. He used to be in the pep band. He's an architect. I had him do a design for Panther U and the Black and Gold Club that I wrote about and published. And it looks amazing. It was great. It had all this different extra stuff in it. He put in a whole banquet space that the university could use, not just for raising money, but for any number of different events. He had a lot of multi-use, but it was mainly for men's and women's basketball to have their own designated space for training, for practice, for weightlifting, for athletic training. It had a connecting bridge on the second bridge over the road in between the building and the Klotsche Center Pavilion that would go straight to the athletic training offices. It was really well put together, and it would have been 3 times as good, 4 times as good as the best practice facility in the Horizon League at the time. So the idea is that you elevate the program. They shifted that segregated fee after it was made into athletics facilities fee. It ended up being dropped from $25 to $16 a semester because Amanda can't sell anything. She couldn't sell water to a guy in the Sahara who has no moisture in his mouth anymore.
Oh,
but
Jesus.
The fee ended up losing money on it, and eventually I think it might have ended up getting completely dropped. The fact of the matter is they got this approval finally.
Mm-hmm.
No state money is going to be used. This is all money that is coming from the seg fee money that was already collected.
It's just been sitting there, I assume.
And they're saying that it's coming from donations. You could put $50 into it from donations and say, hey, the money paying for this is coming from student seg fees and donations. So we don't have the figures in front of us, obviously, because they haven't put that out there.
No.
But the idea is that you expand it so men's and women's basketball have their own practice space, which they've had 2 hours a day at most for the last forever, in a space where they've been kicked. I've been at men's basketball practices where they've had student workers come in and tell them they have to get out so that the dodgeball intramurals can start. Like this is the kind of hokey, just basic shit that happens.
Obviously.
At Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the biggest singular problem, and building this facility helps it. Now, they're going to spend something like $7 or $8 million building this place.
Yeah.
Setzer Pavilion at Wright State was built 10 years ago for about $9 million. Today's money, that's like $14 or $15 million.
Uh-huh.
So Milwaukee's practice facility is going to be, what, 2/3 of what Wright State's is?
Something like that.
The practice facility, it's nice. It helps.
Yeah.
It's definitely great for and the way they pitched it to the state was the way we said do it, which is you free up space not just for intercollegiate athletics, but you're adding space for general student use as well, because now that the Klotsche opens up for several hours a day that it wouldn't otherwise be open.
Exactly.
So we pitched that, or they pitched that. They finally got it approved. Scott Walker's not governor anymore. He's not running for president anymore. So Tony Evers, the new governor, who's a Democrat, and the Republicans in the state legislature, the Republicans own both houses of the state legislature. They agreed that all right, it's time. Let's let them spend the money.
Sure.
So they've got the approval to do it. They're going to get a firm to put together the design. They're going to select the design. They're going to go with it. They're going to build it. It should be open by 2023.
Okay.
So it's going to be quite a while. I don't know if Pat Baldwin's still going to be here at that point. If he doesn't get markedly better, I think even Amanda would probably pull the plug by that point. But the fact of the matter is that this is going to be a Horizon League level practice facility. So my problem from it comes that we're missing out on a huge opportunity to vault the basketball program and with it the university to new heights that they haven't been to before.
Sure. I mean,
that's the problem.
So basically, you're spending. So from what it sounds like, from what it sounds like, your concern is they're just basically spending this money to keep the status quo.
I wouldn't call it totally keeping the status quo, because they are opening up space.
Yeah.
I mean, Steve Mohar is the guy. Mm-hmm. Steve Mohar runs the facilities.
Sure.
He runs the recreation department basically for the school. Uh-huh. So I'm sure he's like.
Oh, I'm sure he's over the moon.
Over the moon.
Absolutely.
And it does help. Mm-hmm. And basketball, having it so that dodgeball workers don't come in and kick you out of your practice will help.
Yeah.
But we had an opportunity
to go next level, and you just didn't.
$15 million is an MVC level facility. Drake just built one for $12 million.
Uh-huh.
We've got 15, double the cost, double the cost. Well, continue collecting the segregated fee, jackasses. And number two, if you're raising money, raise some money and actually do it. So if we had done even $15 million, you could have built a practice facility that would be at or near the class of the conference, solve the biggest problem for the basketball program, the biggest annual problem for the basketball program, and gave people real excitement and hope for the future of the basketball program. Instead, they're going to take what money they've already got
Yeah.
and put it into building a nice place.
There.
There's no weightlifting. They're not putting the coaches' offices over there. From what I gather, they're saying that they're not going to raise student segregated fees.
Yeah.
Which I get it, that you don't want students to see, but you also scale it back from $25 to $16. So go fuck yourselves to begin with, because you could have just left it at $25.
True.
What students couldn't have one less Qdoba burrito a year? Like, just kiss my ass. I can't believe that she couldn't sell saving $9 a student a semester in that segregated athletics fee. It's an absolute joke. It's the easiest sale job ever. Oh, students lose out on $18 a year. That's 2 lunches out at the Taco Bell in the Union. It ain't that big of a deal.
That is amazing. And that is kind of amazing to me that she couldn't sell that, because John Perry, who couldn't sell anything and to save his life, was able to sell student. Well, actually, no. He kind of caused people. Actually, it wasn't his sales job. It was basically he screwed up in the first place and actually prompted a kind of a revolt against him to raise student fees to keep wrestling and add
lacrosse
and more to the point, actually add women's track and field too, because they added
Nice.
that in there as well. So yeah, so come on. I mean, so she could have even played the I need you to revolt against me card, and she didn't do that. So that's crazy to me. But that is the situation that is Milwaukee at this point, man. I don't know what to tell you. And I mean, and to have a situation where, and it seems like it's not just that situation, but a lot of other different moving parts that kind of contributed to this prolonged delay, even because this money has been collected. This money has been collected since what? You said 2011, was it?
2010-11 school year.
Yeah, so it's that money that has been just I don't know.
It's money that's already collected. It was supposed to be collected for 25 school years.
Yeah.
And I get the idea that, it sucks that the kids that are graduating high school in 2023 got to pay for this practice facility. But hey, guys, there are a lot of things that students don't like paying for that they pay for to go to the university.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that do it. And you can talk about how college athletics shouldn't exist. And honestly, I agree. College athletics shouldn't be a thing. But this is America. This is how our system works. This is the game we play.
Mm-hmm.
It allows a couple 100,000 people to get a college education where they might not otherwise be able to get it. It allows people to get prepared for life afterwards. There's a lot of good things that college athletics does. In a perfect world, college athletics wouldn't exist. All these things would be separate from the universities, and the universities wouldn't have to be worried about funding it. But the fact of the matter is, this is America. College athletics, specifically the revenue sports, football, men's basketball, ice hockey somewhere, women's basketball if you're at a place like UConn or Tennessee or Notre Dame, baseball if you're at a place like Arizona. The revenue sports are they're marketing for the university.
Yeah.
So you look at this as, okay, this is a building that you're going to build for the next 50 years that is going to be marketing for the university.
Yes.
It makes the basketball program better. So if this is a 50-year building, you don't look at it as $7 million or $8 million that you're spending of these 7 fees, of the years of the segregated fees. Look at it as $7 or $8 million that you're spending over 50 years. It ain't a big chunk of money.
No. I mean, but then at the same time too, if you have a successful revenue program like a men's basketball, that also helps the exposure to the university. It say for example, if you have a school that goes to the NCAA tournament, they're on TV, they're on national television. You see a kid sees that team on national television, says, they start considering going to that school where they might not have considered that before, and applications go, applications to the university goes up, things like that. I mean, it's all there. It's all,
yeah.
It's all basic. I mean, it's all, these are things that have been proven time and time again. I mean,
and not only proven, but proven at Horizon League schools.
Yes,
absolutely. I was a class of 2005. We had made our college decisions. Right, our senior year was when the university went to the Sweet 16.
Yep.
Fall of 2005, we had 26,000 students. Mm-hmm. By 3 years later, we had 32,000 students. Mm-hmm. Butler, Final Four. They go to the Final Four. Their applications raise like 800%.
Yeah.
You drive admissions. You drive applications. You drive student retention. You drive student engagement. All of these things that they talk about and spend money doing other stuff on in student life, these are things that are boosted by a successful national basketball program.
Yes.
There's a reason that
it is not. I mean, we're not talking out of our ass on this either. There have been time and time again. Yes, there are time and time again. We've been there's empirical proof of this entire thing. Loyola Chicago making the Final Four. Their applications are just boosted up astronomically.
Just came a few years after they're building the practice facility, renovating the Gentile Arena.
Yes, and so those are
conferences.
But I mean, but back to your original point, obviously, that having that kind of foresight does not exactly seem like Milwaukee's strong suit at the moment.
I think Milwaukee. I think that I would like to think that Amanda Braun, as the AD, if she's really a good fundraiser, this is going to be a $15 million building, and then I'll shut up. But and then I'll probably leave her alone.
But let me ask you this: do you have any proof of that even? I mean, is she going to go back to the same angry donors who didn't like Rob Jeter in the first place?
Or maybe she'll go back to Fred Sitzberger, who never went to a basketball game in his life, but somehow decided to give $1 million to the university for men's basketball out of the blue. And as far as I know, maybe showed up for a round of applause at one game and never came back since. That was a dollar amount that was going somewhere else. And they convinced him, let's just give it to men's basketball because we got some PR problems here. I don't think she's raised shit for the men's basketball program. I think she's raised some money in tiny amounts for her excellence fund, for her Fire Rob Jeter fund. I think she raised money for, certain things for quality of life stuff for non-revenue sports, which
awesome, I guess,
are the class of the conference. And the fact of the matter is, this men's basketball program, which is the only the program that drives everything else. Mm-hmm. We're churning our wheels, and she's and if you were, I'm not on her page because I don't want to look at her face. But if you look at her resume, I 100% believe she will point out that there have been $6 million of improvements to the Panther Arena that have happened during her watch, except that's $6 million that Harris Turner spent, who was a donor, who's no longer a donor because he hates her living guts.
Fun.
That's secondhand. I haven't talked to Harris Turner directly about that.
Okay, gotcha.
Or Mike Zimmerman, who owns the Rock Ventures, building a baseball stadium at the Rock on 76th and Rawson in the southwest suburbs. Builds this baseball stadium because he's going to bring in he's going to start an independent league team.
Yeah.
And by the way, UWM needs a baseball field. I'm sure Amanda will point out that they're building a new baseball stadium. I'm sure that's on her resume. She is the queen of piggybacking on better people's accomplishments.
Well, okay, then that brings me, and we're going to wrap this up because we're way over. But this brings me to a final point. And we've literally talked about Amanda Braun multiple times over the last few years. I bring her name up because she's the direct person. I would also point Mark Money as a big problem. At what point in time At what point in time does this administration does this administration look at the body of work and finally say, stop this fucking madness? At what point in time does this administration do that? Or will it never happen?
This administration doesn't. Mark Money has to go first. Because
really?
I honestly subscribe to the idea that Amanda Braun knows about this 30%, or Mark Money approved this idea to take 30% of donations from the other programs, give it to the Excellence Fund, which is the Fire Rob Jeter Fund. Mark Money approved it. This is speculation. I am not saying this has happened, but I subscribe to this idea that he approved this plan.
This is not 100% fact. This is Jimmy's opinion here.
This is something that I've been told by others that I never reported on. I mean, this is 3 years later I'm talking about this. Sure. I never talked about this in 2016.
No.
So to give people an idea, this isn't like I didn't report on it because I didn't have I didn't have the people on the record willing to say it, and I also wanted to step away from it.
Sure.
But I wanted to get away from it. So, sure. Yes, like you can call it an opinion, whatever. It's call it hearsay, whatever you want. It makes sense that Mark Money could look at somebody who has achieved nothing and lost a lot in the biggest program in the biggest program in the university in athletics, and somebody who has only achievements have been piggybacked on others, and say, okay, well, she hasn't really done anything, and now we're paying her $230,000 or whatever it is a year to basically do nothing. So maybe we should move on. But I don't subscribe to it. I subscribe to the idea that he's looking at it as, well, I fire her, she's probably going to turn me in.
Probably.
Because
maybe, I guess.
If she wants to, she could.
She knows where all the bodies are buried.
You know what I mean? Like this is, I've got something on you, so of course you're going to give me. In what world?
What could possibly be so? What could be so? I'm sorry, but what could be so insidious? What could be so massively insidious? I mean, seriously.
They just give her a 4-year extension. I had donors that I haven't heard from in years texting me, "Oh my God, blah 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 blah." Just told me this, that Amanda's not getting renewed in June. That Amanda's going to be done. That they're just going to let her go. And I'm like, oh crap, shit. I'm excited for that, but I'm also like you, Bob. I'm beaten down by years of being disappointed.
Yeah.
So I was like, you take it to somebody or put somebody on the record.
Yeah.
And of course, none of them would say like, oh yeah, this is what's going to happen. And none of them, and of course, what happens is that she gets her extension. I don't hear from the donors.
No, of course not.
Or I hear what the fuck happened.
So from what it sounds like,
happening.
So honestly, from what it sounds like, her extension we can kind of compare to the 3-year extension from John Perry, where we're all scratching our head wondering how on earth did this happen. Although I could say for in the case of John Perry, it's mostly because the president at the time, Ronald Berkman, basically he's be honest, his whole grasp of athletics is minimal at best, whereas I don't know what the hell Mark Money's doing. Let's be honest.
I don't think Mark Money knows what Mark Money's doing.
So that's
I think Mark Money wants athletics to be as I think he would just prefer that athletics stayed silent.
Sure.
Just exist. We just don't make any bad waves. I think that's what we're looking at from his angle.
And now and with this announcement for the and probably in his mind, this announcement of this building, of this extension of the Klotsche Center, whatever the hell it's called, it seems to me he would consider this to be good news, to justify kind of his decision-making process, I guess. I mean, that's what it sounds like to me, at least.
Sure.
So, all right. So, wow. Okay. So that's definitely gonna wrap it up. If you stayed this long to listen, thanks. we'll definitely we're definitely taking next week off because it's Labor Day weekend. I'm sure it's hell ain't
Of course.
podcast. But as always, you can catch episodes of the Horizon Roundtable basically wherever you can find podcasts, but definitely at horizonroundtable.com. Like I said, we got content coming up all over the place. We're going to have some more. Obviously, we're looking forward to it. You can find us wherever you find podcasts. Get on your Google and Amazon devices. And as always, thank you for listening.